Hi everyone. So today is the feast of the Epiphany, which is the last day of sort of the traditional Christmas season. So, for instance, also called sort of 12th night or 12th day, because again, the 12 days of Christmas, we're at the end of it now. And I had some thoughts as I was mulling over a sort of detailed blog post by the Thanes of Mercia, who, for anyone who isn't familiar with their work, they are a very sort of well-respected and top-tier sort of living history group. They do a lot of interesting research. And earlier, sort of towards the Feast of the Nativity, sort of Christmas Day proper, if you will, December 25th, they put out a very well-researched article on sort of the celebrations of Christmas in Anglo-Saxon England. And the more I thought over, I feel like I have some thoughts about this that I think are worth sort of going over. So there's sort of two main points in the article that I want to draw attention to. One is they point out that the sort of pre-Christian, if it is pre-Christian, festival of Yule probably didn't influence the importance of the Nativity, of Christmas Day. Because Yule doesn't actually seem to have been a winter solstice festival. It wouldn't have actually been around Christmas Day, but instead would have happened later on, around sort of early January, probably. And we know this based off of sort of the way it seems to have been calculated in Iceland. So if we assume that sort of the other sort of North Germanic peoples that are coming from the sort of wider Scandinavian world were doing something similar with their Yule, then again it wouldn't have been around Christmas Day. They also note, however, that Christmas Day, the Feast of the Nativity, doesn't seem to have been a big sort of cultural celebration, if you will. Although I'm going to sort of draw a distinction between the cultural and the spiritual. In a way that I don't think those terminology is the best. So sort of what they sort of point out, and what seems to again be true, because again they are high quality researchers, is that while sort of the Feast of the Nativity and Christmas Day seems to have been largely just a sort of sacred religious holiday. It's the day of baptisms and other sort of just spiritual things like that, and instead sort of when they would sort of have secular celebrations, their sort of cultural holiday, if you will, their equivalent to a Christmas party wouldn't have happened around the Feast of the Nativity on the 25th, but instead at around the Feast of the Epiphany, which is again today, January 6th. And something that the Thanes of Mercia point out in that blog post is that this could be because of the religious symbolism there, that the English, the Anglo-Saxons, were a Gentile people. And, the sort of Feast of the Epiphany, when you have the three magi come from the East, they are also a Gentile people. And they sort of argue that this could be a spiritual connection between sort of the recognition by the Gentiles of Christ as the Messiah, and how that could be of great spiritual importance, and that could be why sort of culturally the Anglo-Saxons and seem to have focused much more on the Epiphany than on the actual Nativity. And I think that's sort of, it's not a bad theory, but I think they're sort of missing a few key points there. The biggest one is, again, this is sort of the cultural festival and not actually the sort of period of religious devotion. The religious devotion is appearing during the Nativity. That's, again, where you're having these baptisms and a lot more sort of religious focus. Whereas if they were identifying with the Epiphany for those very spiritual reasons, then we might expect more spirituality to be happening on the Epiphany. The spirituality that we are seeing at the Feast of the Nativity happening at the Epiphany. So I think, I don't want to say that's a bad point. That certainly is something to keep in mind. And that could be a piece of the puzzle, but I feel like that can't be sort of as much of an explanation as the blog post might seem to be putting in there. Instead, I think it relates to that other point I mentioned, which is that Yule seems to have happened in early January rather than sort of late December. And instead, the reason why we're having the sort of secular celebrations happening around the Epiphany is that it is the closest or often could be the closest sort of Christian feast day to that old celebration of Yule. And again, that's not to say that the festivities were sort of being stolen, as a lot of sort of armchair historians, if you will. Not to say that I'm not an armchair historian, but it's not that this feast day is being sort of stolen by these people, because one, we know the Epiphany is happening before the Anglo-Saxons and other Scandinavians are converting, but also just because these are the same people. It's somebody who's used to having a sort of big feast, in January, is then sort of tying that into their new Christian framework as they convert. But that celebration is still happening. Just it's being tied to, again, the nearest religious festival that they're celebrating now post conversion, which would happen to be the Epiphany rather than the Nativity. So I think, again, the article is really great. It's definitely worth sort of going to the Thames website and looking that up. But I think one of the reasons why the Epiphany might have been sort of a bigger cultural festival than the Nativity is its closeness to Yule, to those sort of North Germanic and Scandinavian people.